Inside the bank, my daughter forced documents on me, until the cashier saw my secret note. My daughter's voice was gentle, almost sweet, the same tone she used when she was little and wanted something she knew she shouldn't ask for. "Mama, please, just sign here," she said, sliding the paper closer across the polished surface of the desk. Her smile was warm, practiced, the kind that looked convincing to strangers and cameras. To anyone watching, we were simply a family handling routine business. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. What no one saw was the way my arm ached, Rashid's hand wrapped tightly around my upper arm, fingers digging just enough to remind me that resistance would have consequences. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, smiling faintly as if this were all under control. The pressure of his grip made my skin throb, but I kept my face still. Years of swallowing discomfort had trained me well. We were sitting in a bank, surrounded by people going about their ordinary lives. A man nearby counted cash with quick, efficient movements. A woman in line checked her watch impatiently. The low hum of machines and quiet conversations filled the air. Life continued around us, indifferent to the fact that my world was being dismantled one signature at a time. "It's nothing serious, Mama," my daughter said again. "Just a small transfer so I can fix some paperwork. You don't need to worry yourself." But I had already seen the documents. The numbers stared back at me with brutal clarity. This wasn't a small transfer. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't paperwork. It was everything I had left. $50,000. The last remains of a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and careful saving. The money my late husband and I had planned to live on when our working years were behind us. The money that stood between me and poverty. The air conditioner hummed overhead, but sweat gathered along my spine. My heart beat so loudly I was sure others could hear it. I picked up the pen, my hand shaking, the ink looking darker than it should have, as if it already knew the damage it was about to do. "Come on," Rashid whispered near my ear, his breath smelling of coffee and impatience. "Don't make this difficult. Think about your granddaughter. Think about everything we've done for you. Everything they had done for me." The irony burned so fiercely it made my throat tighten. I was the one who had paid for my daughter's education. I was the one who had helped them buy their house. I was the one who had covered Rashid's debts when he lost his job and promised to pay me back. $20,000 that had vanished into excuses and silence. Now they were here, smiling, touching me gently enough to avoid attention, trying to take the last thing I owned. My daughter leaned closer, her perfume mixing with the sharp scent of my fear. "Mama, trust me. You can't manage this kind of money anymore. Let us handle it for you. It's for your own good." Her words were smooth, coated in concern, but I recognized them for what they were. Control dressed up as love. Manipulation disguised as care. I looked around desperately, searching for someone who might notice. A young teller glanced in our direction briefly before turning away. A couple laughed quietly while filling out forms. No one saw the way Rashid's fingers tightened when my hand hesitated. No one noticed the silent plea forming behind my eyes. "Stop shaking," Rashid muttered, smiling broadly as a bank employee passed nearby. "You're making it obvious." The realization hit me then with terrifying clarity. He was capable of hurting me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but efficiently. And my daughter was watching, allowing it, participating in it. The clock on the wall read 3:15 p.m. An ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that usually passed without significance. Yet here I was, about to lose everything I had worked for in the quiet, invisible ways that never earn praise. I remembered how this had started. That morning, my daughter had called with urgency in her voice. "Mama, we need to go to the bank today. There are some papers you need to sign. It's important." She hadn't explained further, and I hadn't asked. I rarely did. Asking questions had never been part of my role. The bank manager approached our table, his expression polite and professional. "Everything all right here? Can I assist you with anything?" Hope flared suddenly, dangerously. My heart pounded as I nodded, then shook my head, unable to find my voice. Words felt trapped behind years of obedience and fear. I did the only thing I could think of. With trembling hands, I picked up a small slip of paper from the desk and wrote quickly, my handwriting uneven and rushed. Help. I'm being pressured. I don't want to sign. I folded the paper carefully, hiding it in my palm. When my daughter and Rashid leaned over the documents, arguing quietly about account numbers, I slid the note toward the manager as discreetly as possible. He picked it up. Read it. For a fraction of a second, his eyes widened. Then his expression smoothed back into calm professionalism. But something had changed. I could feel it. Excuse me, he said evenly. I need to review some details of this transaction before we proceed. Rashid looked up sharply. What details? Everything is fine. She's just transferring money to her daughter. Family matter. The manager smiled, but his tone was firm. For transactions of this size, we need to verify consent privately. Standard procedure. Mrs. Ahmed, if you'll come with me. My daughter stiffened. That's not necessary. We can handle it here. I'm afraid it is, the manager replied, already standing. Two security guards moved subtly closer, positioning themselves nearby. My legs felt weak as I stood. Rashid's hand released my arm, reluctantly, as if he knew he had no choice. My daughter reached for me, her grip tight but not painful. Mama, she whispered urgently. Don't complicate this. I couldn't look at her. If I did, I might collapse back into the familiar pattern of surrender. I followed the manager down the hallway, my heart racing with equal parts terror and relief. Inside his office, the door closed softly behind us. Mrs. Ahmed, he said gently, taking a seat across from me. Tell me what's really happening. And I did. The words poured out of me, messy and emotional. I told him about the years of financial support, the promises never kept, the guilt, the pressure, the threats wrapped in concern. I showed him my arm, already beginning to bruise. I told him that this money was all I had left, that without it I would have nothing. He listened carefully, taking notes, nodding occasionally. What you're describing, he said finally, is financial coercion. In some cases, it's considered elder abuse. You have the right to say no. The word abuse echoed in my mind. I had never thought of myself as abused. I had thought of myself as a mother doing her duty. What happens now? I asked quietly. We cancel the transaction, he said. We secure your accounts. And we make sure you leave here safely. Something loosened in my chest. For the first time that day, I could breathe. When we returned to the lobby, my daughter rushed toward me, her face tight with controlled anger. What took so long? I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strength I didn't know I still had. I'm not signing, I said. The silence that followed felt heavy and absolute. My daughter stared at me in disbelief. Rashid's jaw clenched, his smile disappearing. What do you mean you're not signing? She asked, her voice trembling. I mean it's my money, I said, my voice steady despite the fear roaring inside me. And I'm keeping it. People nearby began to look. Whispers rippled softly through the room. Rashid took a step forward, but the security guards moved instantly, blocking his path. This discussion is over, the manager said firmly. You need to leave the premises. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, but I recognized them now for what they were. Not grief. Not remorse. Manipulation. This isn't over, she hissed as they were escorted away. As the doors closed behind them, my legs gave out and I sank into a chair. My entire body shook, exhausted, terrified, but alive. How do you feel? The manager asked quietly. I thought for a moment. Scared, I admitted. But free. The days after the bank incident moved strangely, as if time itself had lost its rhythm. Hours stretched too long, nights passed too quickly, and silence settled into my house like a heavy fog. I had lived with noise for so many years. Phones ringing, doors opening, voices asking, demanding, pleading, that the quiet felt unnatural, almost threatening. Every sound made me flinch. Every passing car made me wonder if my daughter had returned to finish what she had started. That first night, I slept poorly. I woke at every small creak of the house, my heart racing, my arm aching where Rashid's fingers had bruised my skin. When morning came, sunlight filtered through the curtains as it always had, but it felt unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else's life. I sat at the kitchen table holding a cup of tea that went cold in my hands, replaying the bank scene over and over in my mind. The pen. The paper. The manager's eyes when he read my note. The moment I said no. I had said no. The realization brought relief, then guilt, then fear in quick succession. For decades, my identity had been built on giving. I was the one who solved problems, the one who sacrificed quietly, the one who never said no when family needed help. Without that role, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. My phone rang just after breakfast. I stared at the screen until it stopped. A message followed moments later. "Mama, I don't understand what's gotten into you. We were only trying to help. Please call me." I deleted it. Another message came an hour later. "Carla is asking about you. She's confused and upset. Is this really what you want?" That one hurt more. My granddaughter's name had always been my weak spot, and my daughter knew it. She had learned long ago exactly which strings to pull to make me bend. But something had shifted inside me. The pain was still there, sharp and deep, but it no longer controlled my hands. By the third day, the messages turned colder. "You embarrassed us at the bank." People were staring. "Rashid is furious. This is not how families treat each other." Families. The word echoed bitterly. I had spent my life believing that family meant endurance, silence, sacrifice. That love was proven by how much you were willing to give up. Only now did I begin to see how that belief had been used against me. That afternoon, my sister Nadia called. Her voice carried concern, but also doubt. "My daughter says you're not well," she said carefully. "She says the bank staff scared you, filled your head with nonsense." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the sofa. "Did she tell you her husband grabbed my arm so hard it bruised?" I asked quietly. There was a pause on the line. "She didn't mention that," my sister said. "Did she tell you they tried to take all my savings?" I continued. "Everything I have left." Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't know it was that serious," she admitted. "It was serious enough that I had to pass a note asking for help," I said. Saying it out loud made it more real, more undeniable. "I was afraid." My sister exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry. I should have listened better." After we hung up, I felt both relieved and sad. Relieved that someone finally understood. Sad that it had taken so much for my pain to be believed. That evening, there was a knock at my door. My heart jumped into my throat as I approached cautiously, peering through the curtain. My daughter stood on the porch, her face carefully arranged into an expression of concern. Rashid was beside her, his posture relaxed, his hands in his pockets. Between them stood my granddaughter, holding a folded piece of paper. My chest tightened painfully. I did not open the door. The doorbell rang. Once. Twice. Again. "Mama, please," my daughter called out. "We just want to talk." My granddaughter's small voice followed. "Grandma, I made you a drawing." I pressed my back against the wall, tears burning my eyes. Every instinct in me screamed to open the door, to pull her inside, to make everything better. That instinct had guided my life for decades. And it had nearly destroyed me. After nearly an hour, they left. I slid down the wall onto the floor, shaking. Saying no had been harder than I ever imagined, not because it was wrong, but because it was new. That night, sleep refused to come. Memories surfaced uninvited. drifting through my mind like ghosts. I remembered the day my daughter was born, small and fragile, her fingers curling around mine with surprising strength. I remembered promising myself she would never feel abandoned, never feel unsafe. I remembered every school event I attended, every extra shift I worked, every meal I skipped so she could have more. I had kept my promise too well. The next morning, I noticed the bruise on my arm had darkened into shades of blue and yellow. I stared at it in the mirror for a long time. I had hidden injuries before, cuts from kitchen accidents, aches from overwork, but this one felt different. This one had been inflicted deliberately, in the name of family. The realization made my stomach churn. I decided to leave the house. For years, my days had revolved around my daughter's needs, her schedules, her emergencies. Without that structure, the hours felt empty. So I went for a walk, something I hadn't done just for myself in a long time. The neighborhood park was quiet, leaves crunching underfoot as I moved slowly along the path. The air smelled of grass and distant rain. Children played on swings, their laughter light and unburdened. I sat on a bench and watched, feeling strangely disconnected from everything around me. I wondered how many of those parents would still be sacrificing everything for their children decades from now, and how many would one day sit where I was, questioning the cost. When I returned home, there was a message waiting from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Ahmed, this is Amina Salim from the bank. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Please call me if you need anything. The simple kindness in her message brought tears to my eyes. A stranger had shown me more care in one afternoon than my own family had shown me in years. I called her back. She spoke gently, reassuring me that my accounts were secure, that alerts were in place, that no transactions could occur without my direct approval. She gave me contact information for legal resources and a support hotline for seniors facing financial abuse. The word abuse still felt heavy, uncomfortable, but it also felt accurate. That evening, I received a call from my great-niece, Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since she moved to another city for university. Her voice was warm but serious. My father told me what happened, she said. I wanted to reach out because I've been through something similar. She told me her story slowly, carefully. How her own mother had pressured her for money for years. How emergencies were always just around the corner. How guilt had been used like a weapon. How hard it had been to set boundaries, and how freeing it eventually became. There's a support group I attend, she said. It's for people who've been financially abused by family members. It helped me a lot. I think it could help you too. I hesitated. The idea of sitting in a room admitting my failures to strangers made my stomach knot. I'll think about it, I said. After we hung up, I sat quietly, considering how much of my life had been shaped by fear. Fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as selfish. That fear had guided my choices far more than love ever had. The next day, my daughter tried a different approach. Her voice on the phone was soft, almost defeated. Mama, Rashid didn't mean to hurt you. He was just stressed. You know how he gets under pressure. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. Stress does not excuse hurting me, I said. She sighed. I just don't understand why you're doing this now. You've always helped us. You liked helping us. Her words struck a painful truth. I liked being needed. I liked being the solution. I liked feeling essential. I helped because I loved you, I replied. Not because I owed you my future. She was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sharper. So what are we supposed to do now? Just struggle while you sit on money. I'm supposed to live, I said simply. The line went dead. That night, I decided to attend the support group Sarah had mentioned. The library meeting room was small and softly lit. A circle of chairs filled the space, occupied by men and women of various ages, most older than me. Their faces carried the quiet exhaustion of people who had given too much for too long. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook at first. But as I told my story, the years of sacrifice, the manipulation, the bank, I saw nods of recognition around the circle. No judgment. No disbelief. Just understanding. You're not alone, the facilitator said gently. And you're not wrong for protecting yourself. I walked home feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up with a strange realization. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to fix anyone else's problems. And that terrified me almost as much as it relieved me. The support group became an anchor in a week that otherwise felt unmoored. Every Tuesday evening, I walked to the library with a nervous knot in my stomach, unsure of what version of myself would speak once I sat in that circle. Each time, the knot loosened a little more. Listening to others describe lives eerily similar to mine gave shape to something I had struggled to name for decades. It wasn't generosity that had trapped me. It was an obligation disguised as love. One woman, older than me with silver hair cut short and sharp eyes that missed nothing, spoke about her son forging her signature on loan documents. Another man described losing his home after repeatedly refinancing to pay his brother's gambling debts. Their stories were painful, but also clarifying. I wasn't uniquely foolish. I wasn't weak in isolation. I was part of a pattern that thrived on silence and guilt. Between meetings, my daughter continued to test me. Some days she didn't call at all, and the absence felt deliberate, like punishment. Other days she flooded my phone with messages, swinging between apologies and accusations. One afternoon she left a voicemail that chilled me. "Mama, I'm starting to worry about your memory," she said, her tone falsely gentle. "You've never behaved like this before. Maybe you should see a doctor. I just want what's best for you." I listened to the message twice, my hands trembling. It wasn't a concern. It was a calculated attempt to undermine my credibility, to rewrite the story in which I was no longer a rational adult but a confused old woman manipulated by strangers. I deleted the message and wrote the date and time in a small notebook I had started keeping. The facilitator at the support group had suggested it. "Documentation is clarity," she said. "When someone tries to gaslight you, facts are your ground." The notebook became my quiet defense. I recorded calls, messages, visits, memories that resurfaced unexpectedly. Patterns emerged quickly. Every attempt at reconciliation was tied to money, access, or control. There were no questions about my health that didn't lead to finances. No concern that wasn't transactional. Still, the hardest moments involved my granddaughter. One afternoon, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Grandma," my granddaughter's voice said softly. "Mama says you don't want to see me anymore." My heart clenched painfully. "That's not true," I said quickly. "I always want to see you." There was a pause. I could hear someone breathing nearby. "Then why don't you come over?" she asked. "Mama says you're mad at us." I closed my eyes. This was exactly what I had feared. My daughter was using her child as a bridge, sending innocence ahead to soften me. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to fix. That doesn't mean I stopped loving you." Another pause. "Mama says we need help," she whispered. "She says you have money." There it was. The lesson being taught quietly, persistently. Love equals money. Help equals obedience. "Listen to me," I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. "I love you for who you are, not because of money. And it's your parents' job to take care of those things." The line went silent, then disconnected. I sat there afterward, shaken, realizing the damage extended beyond me. My years of unchecked giving had not only enabled my daughter's dependency, but also taught my granddaughter expectations that would shape her relationships in ways I never intended. That realization hurt more than losing money ever could. A week later, my sister called again, her tone hesitant. "I ran into your daughter," she said. "She's very angry. She says you've changed. That you're selfish now." The word selfish still triggered something deep in me. It had always been the accusation I feared most. "Do you think I'm selfish?" I asked quietly. My sister hesitated. "No," she admitted. "I think you're tired. And maybe you've finally reached a limit." That was the most validation I'd ever received from family, and it felt strangely bittersweet. Around that time, Amina from the bank called again. Her voice was professional but warm. "I wanted to inform you of something," she said. "Your daughter and her husband attempted to access a secondary account linked to your name." My stomach dropped. "What account?" "One you opened years ago," she explained gently. "Your daughter was listed as an authorized user. It contained $12,000. $12,000. Money I had completely forgotten, lost in the chaos of hospital visits and family emergencies. They tried to withdraw it," Amina continued. "The system flagged the attempt because of the alerts we placed. When denied, they became aggressive. Security had to intervene." The room spun slightly. This hadn't been a misunderstanding. It hadn't been desperation. It had been a plan. "What happens now?" I asked. "We've removed all secondary access," she said. "The account is now fully secured under your name." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The bank incident hadn't been the beginning of betrayal. It had simply been the moment I finally noticed. I brought the news to the support group that evening. The reaction was immediate but unsurprised. "They always look for hidden doors," the facilitator said. "When one closes, they check for another." That night, something in me shifted permanently. The doubt that had lingered, the question of whether I had overreacted, finally dissolved. The facts were undeniable. My daughter and her husband had been systematically attempting to drain my resources, using affection, guilt, and intimidation interchangeably. The grief that followed was deep and complicated. I mourned the daughter I thought I had. I mourned the relationship I believed we shared. I mourned the years I spent believing that my worth depended on my usefulness. But grief, I learned, could coexist with growth. I began reclaiming pieces of myself slowly. I enrolled in a painting class at the community center, something I had always wanted to try but never had time for. The first time I held a brush, my hand shook, not from fear, but from unfamiliarity. I hadn't created anything just for myself in decades. The instructor praised my landscapes gently. "You have a good sense of space," she said. "You see depth." I almost laughed at that. For years, I had been flattened into service. Now someone saw depth. I also started volunteering twice a week at a women's shelter, helping with administrative tasks and simply listening. Many of the women there had stories different from mine, yet threaded with the same themes: control, guilt, fear, survival. Helping them from a place of choice rather than obligation felt radically different from everything I had known before. My finances improved without effort. Without constant emergencies draining my account, my savings stabilized. For the first time, I could plan beyond the next crisis. I could imagine a future that belonged to me. When my daughter found out about my painting classes, she laughed during one phone call. "So now you're an artist," she scoffed. "It must be nice to have hobbies when your family is struggling." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "I hope things improve for you," and ended the call. That response angered her more than any confrontation ever had. Months passed. The silence between us grew heavier, but it no longer frightened me. I filled it with friendships, routines, and small pleasures I had denied myself for years. Morning walks. Coffee with classmates. Long conversations with my great-niece Sarah, who had become a quiet source of encouragement. One evening, Sarah invited me to dinner at her apartment. "You've spent your life taking care of others," she said as she served food. "It's okay to enjoy what you've earned." Her words settled into me like a truth I had always known but never allowed myself to accept. A few weeks later, she suggested something that initially felt absurd. "You should travel," she said casually. Go somewhere you've always wanted to see. I laughed it off at first. Women like me didn't travel alone. We waited. We were saved. We postponed joy indefinitely. But the idea lingered. One night, after a particularly vivid dream of Cameron smiling at me from across a sunlit street, I opened my laptop and searched for small towns in Italy. The images, stone streets, open markets, rolling hills, stirred something inside me. The next morning, I booked the trip. When my daughter found out, she exploded. "You're wasting money on a vacation," she shouted over the phone. "What if something happens? What if you need that money?" "I have enough," I replied calmly. "And I deserve to live." "What about us?" she demanded. "You'll manage," I said. "You always do." I hung up feeling strangely calm. As the departure date approached, fear tried to creep back in. But excitement pushed harder. I packed carefully, deliberately, choosing clothes for comfort and pleasure rather than practicality for others. On the plane, as the ground fell away beneath me, I felt something release. Not anger. Not resentment. A long-held breath. For the first time in my life, I was going somewhere with no intention of rescuing anyone. And that realization felt like freedom. I woke on my first morning in Italy to a light that felt different from any I had known before. It filtered through thin curtains, soft and golden, touching the walls as if it had nowhere else to be. For a moment I lay still, disoriented, unsure of where I was. Then memory returned, and with it a rush of disbelief. I was alone in a small bed and breakfast overlooking a quiet street lined with old stone buildings and flower boxes. No phone ringing. No urgent requests. No one needs me to fix anything. The silence was not empty. It was generous. I dressed slowly and stepped outside, the cool air brushing my skin. The street was already alive in a gentle way. A man swept the doorway of a bakery, the smell of fresh bread drifting into the morning. An elderly woman watered plants and nodded at me as if I belonged there. I walked without direction, letting my feet decide, feeling a lightness in my chest that startled me with its intensity. At a small cafe, I ordered coffee and sat at a round table, watching people pass. Couples spoke quietly, tourists consulted maps, locals greeted one another by name. No one looked at me with expectation. No one knew my history or my sacrifices. I was simply a woman having coffee in the morning. For years, I had believed peace was something you earned after fulfilling every obligation. Standing there, cup warming my hands, I realized peace was something you claimed. Each day unfolded gently. I visited markets where vendors called out cheerfully, offering fruit and cheese. I wandered museums slowly, letting myself linger in front of paintings without worrying about time. I took afternoon naps without guilt, read novels on shaded benches, and wrote in my journal at night, capturing thoughts that had never had space to exist before. I wrote about Cameron. About the man he had been before illness hollowed him out. About his patience, his quiet humor, the way he always encouraged me to rest even when I insisted there was too much to do. I realized with a sharp ache that he had seen my exhaustion long before I acknowledged it myself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, my phone vibrated. My heart jumped reflexively, old habits flaring. I checked the screen. It was Sarah. "How's the adventure?" she wrote. I smiled and sent her a photo of the view, the sky painted in warm colors. "It's beautiful," I replied. "I feel lighter." Her response came quickly. "You always deserved that." Halfway through my trip, my daughter called. I hesitated before answering, staring at the screen while my pulse quickened. I was thousands of miles away, yet her voice still had the power to unsettle me. Finally, I answered. "What are you doing?" she demanded without greeting. "I heard you're in Europe." "I am," I said calmly. "You're spending your retirement money on travel?" Her voice was sharp with disbelief. "What if there's an emergency?" "I've planned for emergencies," I replied. "This is my choice." There was a pause, then a scoff. You've really changed. Yes, I said softly. I have. What about us? She asked, the familiar refrain. I closed my eyes and pictured the quiet street, the cafe, the sunlight. You're adults, I said. You'll figure it out. She hung up without another word. For the first time, her anger didn't follow me like a shadow. It stayed on the other end of the line, distant and manageable. When I returned home weeks later, my house felt different. Smaller, perhaps, but also more mine. I rearranged furniture, donated things I no longer needed, painted a wall a color I liked without consulting anyone. Each small change felt like a declaration. I sold the house 6 months later. The decision surprised even me. The house held too many memories, too many echoes of a life built around others. I bought a small cottage in a quiet neighborhood instead, with a garden that caught the morning sun. It was modest, comfortable, and entirely my own. My daughter reacted with fury. You sold the house, she shouted during one of our rare conversations. That was supposed to stay in the family. It still belongs to family, I said. It belongs to me. She accused me of abandonment, of betrayal, of selfishness. I listened, then said goodbye. The support group remained a constant. I watched newcomers arrive frightened and ashamed, and I recognized myself in them. I shared what I could, not advice, but perspective. Healing wasn't linear. Some days were heavy with doubt. Others were filled with quiet joy. My painting improved. I framed a few pieces and hung them in my new home. Friends visited. We laughed. We shared meals without obligation or expectation. One afternoon, Amina from the bank called again. I thought you'd want to know, she said. Your daughter and her husband attempted another withdrawal, this time from an account they believed was still joint. My chest tightened, but the fear was muted now. And they were denied, she said. All accounts remain secure. I thanked her and hung up, feeling more tired than angry. The attempts no longer surprised me. They simply confirmed what I already knew. 2 years passed. One Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my breath caught. My granddaughter stood on the porch, taller than I remembered, her hair pulled back neatly, her eyes serious. She was 11 now, on the edge of something new. Grandma, she said quietly. Can I come in? I stepped aside immediately. Of course. She looked around my home with curiosity, noting the paintings, the garden visible through the window. She sat carefully on the sofa, hands folded, mirroring a nervousness I hadn't expected. I need to ask you something, she said. And I want you to be honest. My heart pounded. I will be. Is it true my parents tried to take your money at the bank? The moment I had both dreaded and prepared for had arrived. I took a breath. Yes, I said gently. It's true. She nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion. I thought so. She explained how she had overheard arguments, how things never quite made sense, how letters I had written her, letters her mother hid, had raised questions. She spoke with a maturity that made my chest ache. Why did Mama lie? She asked. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes people lie because the truth is uncomfortable, or because they don't know how to face it. She looked down at her hands. I love them, she said. But what they did was wrong. Yes, I agreed. Both can be true. We talked for hours. I told her about my life now, about painting, volunteering, traveling. I showed her my sketches. Her eyes lit up with genuine interest. I want to know you, she said suddenly. Not just the grandma who buys things. The real you. Tears welled in my eyes. I would like that very much. When she left, riding away on her bicycle, I felt a cautious hope take root. Not certainty. Not resolution. But possibility. That night, I wrote in my journal. I am no longer afraid of being alone. I am afraid only of returning to a life where my worth was measured by how much I gave away. I closed the book and stepped into the garden. The air was cool, the sky clear. For the first time in my life, the future felt open, not demanding. I was not done healing. But I was done surrendering. The morning light in my new home arrived gently, filtered through thin curtains and the leaves of the small fig tree outside my bedroom window. I woke without the familiar weight of urgency pressing against my chest. There was no phone ringing, no voice demanding my attention, no unspoken obligation pulling me out of bed before I was ready. I lay there for several minutes simply breathing, listening to the quiet rhythm of my own life. At 71, I had learned something most people never did. Peace does not come from pleasing others. It comes from choosing yourself, even when the cost feels unbearable. My days now followed a pattern shaped by intention rather than reaction. I painted in the mornings when the light was best, my hands steady, my thoughts free to wander across canvas and memory. I volunteered twice a week at the shelter, where women sat across from me with stories of loss, fear, and rebuilding. I never told them what to do. I simply listened. Sometimes listening was the first kindness they had received in years. Money, once the center of so much pain, became quiet again. I budgeted carefully, invested wisely, and allowed myself small joys without guilt. A better mattress. Fresh flowers. A weekend train trip to a nearby town just to see something new. Each purchase was a reminder that my life belonged to me. My daughter did not disappear. She hovered at the edges of my existence like a storm cloud that occasionally drifted close before moving on again. There were months of silence, then sudden flurries of contact. Sometimes she was angry. Sometimes she was sorrowful. Sometimes she pretended nothing had ever happened. I no longer chased clarity from her. One afternoon, nearly a year after my granddaughter's visit, my phone rang with a number I recognized but hadn't seen in months. I answered calmly. "Mama," my daughter said, her voice weary. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just tired. "I heard you're doing well." "I am," I replied. There was a pause. "I don't understand how you can be happy after everything." I thought about it for a moment. "Because happiness no longer depends on your approval," I said gently. She sighed. "You really won't help us anymore." "I will help if you're in real danger," I answered. "But I won't fund your life or allow myself to be harmed again." "That sounds final," she said. "It is," I replied. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply said goodbye and hung up. That conversation, brief as it was, felt like the closing of a long chapter. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Acceptance. My granddaughter returned often after that, sometimes with permission, sometimes quietly, always honest. She asked questions that showed how much she had been thinking, observing, growing. We talked about school, friendships, disappointment, and courage. I never spoke badly about her parents. I didn't need to. She was forming her own understanding of the world, and truth has a way of surfacing without being forced. One afternoon, while we baked together, she said something that stopped me cold. "Grandma," she said, stirring batter carefully, "I don't want to grow up thinking people owe me things just because they love me." I looked at her, my throat tightening. "Then you're already wiser than most adults," I said. She smiled shyly. "I learned that from you." That night, after she left, I sat alone in my garden and cried. Not from pain, but from relief. From the knowledge that something good had survived all the damage. Time continued its quiet work. My paintings were accepted into a small local exhibition. I stood among strangers and listened as someone described my work as honest and strong. I smiled, knowing that those words applied to more than paint on canvas. At the support group, I became a steady presence. New members listened when I spoke, not because I was louder or wiser, but because I had lived through the thing they feared most and survived. I told them the truth gently. "You will doubt yourself," I said. "You will miss the people who hurt you. You will wonder if it would be easier to give in. But easier is not the same as healthier." One evening, I received a call from Amina at the bank, not with a warning this time, but with good news. "I wanted you to know," she said. "Your accounts are in excellent standing. You've done very well." I thanked her and hung up, smiling at the absurdity of being praised for something as basic as protecting myself. Then I remembered the woman I had been in that bank, shaking, trapped, silent. And I allowed myself that pride. On my 72nd birthday, I traveled again. Not far, not extravagant, but intentional. I stood on a quiet shore watching the tide come in and out, thinking about how much of my life had been spent resisting the natural pull of my own needs. The sea didn't apologize for its boundaries. It didn't justify itself. It simply existed. That night, I wrote in my journal one last time. I once believed love meant sacrifice without limit. Now I know love without boundaries is not love at all. It is erasure. I have learned to exist fully, without apology, without fear. I have learned that survival can become freedom, and freedom can become joy. When I returned home, I found a letter waiting for me. My granddaughter's handwriting was neat but still young. "Grandma, I wanted to tell you I got an award at school for being honest and brave. I thought of you. Thank you for teaching me that saying no doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you start loving yourself too." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my journal. In the end, there was no dramatic reconciliation, no public apology, no perfect resolution. Life rarely offers those. What it offered instead was something quieter and far more powerful. I reclaimed myself. I lived. And that, after a lifetime of giving everything away, was more than enough.